Bum 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 bum, ba-da-dum bum 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 bum, bum 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 bum, ba-da-dum bum 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 bum. Welcome to the Voice of Meaning, and we have a very special super duper guest today. I'm Neil, this is Ulrich, and our super duper guest is Herb Ernst, which I would describe as a wonderful, intuitive music, new age music composer, and he's a bit of a poet as well. First of all, Herb, you and Ulrich have had a connection a long time ago regarding music. I'd love you two to reflect on that or talk about that.
Well, Uli and I, his name is Ulrich, but his friends call him Uli. And we met through a group called the Rosicrucian Order, AMORC, A-M-O-R-C. And he was a member, and so was I. And it was in Seattle, and we went to their lodge. And the Rosicrucian group thing is a whole other separate discussion about what all that is. But AMORC, A-M-O-R-C, is Ancient and Mystical Order Rosicrucis. And the emphasis here is mystical, okay, which in another frame is that you get in touch with your higher self, your higher frequency. And that's really what the whole order is about in their teachings. Well, there are different methods to raise your resonant frequency. And one of them is music. And Uli and I met at their function there, and we had a lot in common. Both were in teaching, both were interested in metaphysics, that kind of thing. And we just kind of naturally fell into a friendship there.
And after a while, you showed me some of your projects you were working on, since you're also deeply involved in electronics, and you built, which I think you told me you still have, a light box, which you were able to connect to your piano, and each note had a color, and you could make it do very interesting things. Mm-hmm. So it's not just a musical or a spiritual thing that you were involved in. It was also a technical, which intrigued me, and I really encouraged you to work on those.
Yeah, and I just want to interject. Do you remember the time way back when there was a Rosicrucian function, and I think we were hosting it, and we decided that we'd do a whole demonstration with the light box, which formerly is known as the Lumia. It actually has a word. And we needed the piano to connect with the Lumia. And all 88 keys of the piano had all the wires going in and all this kind of thing. And we wound up getting a truck and putting the piano into it and the Lumia box and the 5 million wires that went in with it, taking it to where we were going, and then unloading it all, hooking it all up. Do you remember that? I don't see how you could possibly forget. Do you remember?
I vaguely remember. I mean, it's been a long time ago. It's been around 40 years.
Yeah.
Maybe a year or two more than that.
Tell me about your production company that you started, 86, I believe.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we called it Musical, well, actually, it's now called Musical Voyages. Back then, do you recall what it was called, Louis? Mystic Visions, I think.
Mystic Visions.
Yeah, that's what we started with, perhaps because of the influence of the Lumia light box and the colors and the different keys and everything, because that's visual, but music is auditory. So after it was all reworked, Musical Voyages kind of became the new name.
And that conversation happened in Portland, Oregon, I think, where we were having breakfast, and my parents were there, and you and your wife and Linda, and my wife and I were, and we thought, well, maybe we can make this work, you know, put some money together. You got the talent, my dad was a graphic artist. Yeah, let's play.
Yeah.
So your dad produced the art? I
On
did not.
the first one.
And tell me about the first one.
The second one. Yeah. Uli's father, Siegfried, was a painter, among other things, and he did the artistry, the cover art for Dreamflight, and then the following one called Dreamflight 2. And Dreamflight 1 had one bird flying through the sky, and Dreamflight 2 remarkably had two birds flying through the sky, and they went together. And then I came out with a Dreamflight 3, and guess what? We had three birds all coming together into a triangle, and just back then. Fan. Let me see. Here's Uli's father's first picture on the album, Dreamflight, and later we got Dreamflight 2. I don't know.
It's hard to see. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Herb, are pictures of those albums on your website?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's herbernst.com.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about that later. But I want to interject a little story myself.
Mhm.
In 1990, I was going through crises that I talked about in my talk that says the struggle for meaning. And one of the places I sought refuge was in the Unity Church. They're like a spiritual hospital. And they used to play New Age music, for meditation. And they recommend you can buy CDs and cassettes of this type of music at a local store in Anchorage called Light in Motion Crystals. So I went down there, and I didn't know about this type of music, and I asked, so what are some of your most favorite New Age music albums? And one of them was Dreamflight. So I bought the CD in 1990 and played it often. I went back to the store subsequently and bought Dreamflight 2. So I loved it. I was able to calm down and meditate to the music. Little did I know that 30 years later, I would meet Herb Ernst in person, or not in person, online. And
Online in person.
yes, and I understand that you reconnected with Ulrich also about 3.5, 4 years ago. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
I was one morning, got up, and I was wondering, I wonder if Herb is still around on this planet. And
I've wondered the same thing, Uli, just look by the way.
so anyway, I
I'm still not sure.
went to his website, found his phone number, called, and he answered. And so after that we met once a week using Messenger, and connection is a really important part of having meaning in one's life, and people having friends in one's life create meaning. So
I agree. And now the three of us meet together on a regular basis. And again, this is one of the good things about technology, because now if you want to look for a long lost person, it's a lot easier to find them than before the days of internet. It was possible,
even if they don't want to be found.
right? Even if they don't want to be found. But it's really neat when people find me that I liked in the past, and they took the initiative to find me. That's one of the fun things. Another coincidence about the three of us, we were all born within a few months of each other in 1950. We're 1950 babies, and we have a fun friendship. I want to go back to your music. I find your music very, very comforting, inspiring, beautiful. I listen to it while I'm walking. I listen to a particular piece of music called Spirit of the Dream. Almost every day I go into a shavasana position. It's a yoga position that you're lying flat on your back, only I put something under the small of my back to prop it up, and it's a really good back exercise.
Mm.
And I love it. And I want to have a session just to talk about Spirit of the Dream some other time, because I've learned a lot from that. But you had mentioned that type of music is quote unquote intuitive music. Would you expound a little bit? What is intuitive music compared to classical or jazz or new age or country music? What's intuitive music?
Well, a big difference with it compared to everything else. Let's talk about everything else for just a moment. Typical music that you have is composed, which means that it's left brain thought out. There's a pattern of intelligence superimposed on it with time signatures and various transposed keys and that kind of thing. And there are so many beats per measure and, you know, all of that structure, okay? Well, intuitive music is really different in the sense that the first thing you do is you don't sit down and start playing. You relax, close in, try to pull in energy into yourself and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Am I anxious? Am I tired? Am I relaxed? Am I happy? Am I introspective? Do I feel like expanding? You know, what am I feeling right now? But you have to clear your own mind and clear your feelings and then basically be a receptive person to whatever energy. And you, once you focus on that, you say, oh, I'm feeling like I have energy right in the center of me. How can I express that musically? Well, there are numerous ways. What I would do is I'd say, okay, I'm in the center of this energy. I'm sitting in front of a piano keyboard. So why don't I start at the middle and perhaps play a middle C? It's the center, right? And then, okay, do I feel introspective? Which would be the way I would express that as a tonal symbol using a minor chord. Or do I feel like I want to connect out with all the energy around me? Well, that's an expansive energy. So what I want to do to express that is play a major chord. So maybe you start out with middle C and you work that into a C major chord. Okay. So what's going on? How do I feel with that? Well, I feel like it wants to express itself. So how do I do that? Well, start playing the major chord back and forth as an example. Okay, does it build in energy? Well, yes, it's starting to happen. So you play it louder. That's building in energy. Well, does it become even more expansive? Well, yes, as a matter of fact. So right hand starts to do arpeggios as it expands. Well, is it kind of mystic woo-woo, or does it have a solid base? You know, well, it needs to be grounded. It's very kind of airy-fairy and open right now. So how about an octave that's in below, C below middle C? Okay, and then you rock that like trembling, okay? And that builds more energy. And you think, wow, this wants to really go somewhere. Well, how do I do that? What do I do? And all of a sudden you think, arpeggios. So you start playing arpeggios up and down, okay? This is all by feeling, okay? It isn't like, well, let's turn on the drum machine. Then no, not there. You're feeling in the moment. so what do you do then? You say, well, where does this want to take me? Well, do I have a need to raise my resonant frequency higher? Or do I just want to sit there in the same range on the keyboard and just do what I'm doing? Okay. Well, when you're in your intuitive mode, you become much more open and much less structured. So you're following feelings and you're constantly in the loop. What am I feeling? What am I feeling? Faster, slower, louder, quieter, minor chord, major chord. What am I doing? All this kind of thing. Am I on the high end of the keyboard because I'm really trying to reach a higher frequency, or I'm in the lower part of the keyboard where I'm pulling in energy for strength? You see, it's a function of what are you feeling and what do you want to feel, and then transposing all that, or transmuting that, if you prefer that word, or simply expressing that through the medium of music. Well, that isn't how you do music typically.
Where did you get you sound like you've had some music training. You talk about arpeggios and this.
Oh,
Where did
yeah.
you learn about music first as far as technical stuff?
Well, I had a little bit of training in high school, but then in my first year of college, I took a year of music theory. And the crazy thing about that was, as I've just described, that is over there in the Andromeda galaxy, and everything else is somewhere in other than that. And we want structure, we want structure, we want structure. And I'm there, I don't want structure, I don't want structure, I don't want structure. And it was very clear to me that where I was and where they, the administration, was, we're not, well, they were mutually exclusive. And I wanted to express musically what I was feeling in my heart and soul. Okay. And they wanted all the structure. And that's why after a year, I decided to change my major, which was music, into, believe it or not, social sciences. Why would I do that? Well, as you yourself mentioned, we were born in 1950. Well, by this time, we're talking about late 1960s. And at that time, in American history, we were involved in the Vietnam War. We were involved with human rights. We had riots in the streets. We had suffered several major assassinations, and it seemed like the whole society was going to crumble. And I thought, maybe I should focus on being something more committed to the welfare of the country and doing that kind of thing, trying to first understand it and then do whatever I could to heal it and all that. So I shifted over into the social sciences and I majored in sociology. And by the time I got out of school, the Great Society that President Lyndon Johnson started was all collapsed and demonetized and all this. And we had Richard Nixon as the president, and those social programs had just basically disassembled, I should not disassemblated.
I'd like to
It all fell apart. And so I did what I could with that and got into the teaching profession, which paid next to nothing. And so after that, I thought, gee, it would be nice to actually make a real living somehow. And I had developed through music an interest in electronics, because that was the time that the Moog synthesizer had come out and others, the Buchla and others. And it was a whole amazing new sound that people had never heard before. And so that was a very big fascination for me. And ultimately I wound up going back to school. And this time I got a degree in electronic technology. So with that, after I got that, then I got hired into an airplane manufacturing company in Seattle. Do I need to name that one? I think everybody knows it. And I worked there for 20 years. And
that's in the time frame that we met.
yeah, and
So
but
you started the music company after you were working for Boeing, is that correct?
yes, that's
It's
true.
kind of a side gig.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
We
And
invented the side gig.
yeah, I think
I
so.
can see that.
The
And
young people
now,
think that they invented it, but it was
Yeah,
us old guys.
yeah.
right. And now we
Well,
have a YouTube channel, which is also kind of a side gig. Um,
mm, yeah.
this is very interesting. I want to a little bit zero in on this story of how the spirit of the dream was born.
Mm.
What, ha- how did it come into the world? Can you tell us that story?
Well, yeah. Without a whole lot of filigree and everything. Um, my wife is Canadian, uh, and we were living in the U.S. and she was missing her family, her grandchildren, and her own two daughters who are now adults. And she was saying, I'd really like to move back to Canada. And I was in the American South, and it was very different in culture and weather and everything else. And I had lived 30 years in the Pacific Northwest. Then I said, okay, I'd like to go too. And so we moved to Canada. Well, so here we are in Canada. And I didn't mention that I had been a, a music director in a local church in Georgia. And I did that for about 5 years, playing intuitive music during meditations. So we got here and come to find out that there were people here on Vancouver Island, where we are now, who actually were familiar with my music. I mean, wow, And the bottom line through all that, I was invited to play music in a town just north of Nanaimo, where I am now. And I was invited there, and with the help of grandchildren and everything, we loaded my van full of music equipment and went off to a town called Comox and set it all up. And I had done absolutely everything except figure out what in the world I was going to play. Now, if you're a musician, you know how dangerous that is. Okay. It is like you have all these memorized songs and you're going to just play them all. No, in intuitive music, you invent it as you feel it and express it as you feel it. And that's a very, very scary thing if you're a musician, because it can happen that the mystical buffer, as energy comes in, that buffer fills up and you get stuck and you don't have something to play. That's a very unfortunate place to be. And that's on your consciousness. But I had done this kind of thing for a while and I was pretty used to it. And so I sat down at my keyboards and my expander modules, which had more sounds and all this kind of thing, and just said, okay, what am I feeling right now? Well, I'm quiet and I'm relaxed and I want simplicity and I don't want fireworks and that kind of thing with a lot of grandiose music playing. What I really want is something absolutely pure of the heart. So I used what I called my tonal symbols, which is another whole other discussion. And I chose flute with an echo on it. And it begins very simply. And I was able to record it at that performance. And as I played, the feelings changed. And then I would press another setting on my synthesizers and modules, and I would get another sound. And then that would trigger more ideas and more feelings. And I would go with that. And then it would run out. And if you listen to the recording of Spirit of a Dream, there are gaps, openings, empty spaces. And what's going on there is I am just recentering myself to say, okay, I played that. What is next? What else wants to be played? Well, let's try this. And then I'd punch some other buttons, and that would become another sound setup. Well, now what happens? Well, that triggers new ideas and new feelings and new things to express with that sound system much better than the original one, the flute, for example. So now you're into a whole different sonic and feeling space. And I'd explore that just in the moment at that time. Can you imagine how scary this would be for most
I
musicians?
would never have known that you were scared. Question, towards the latter part of it, there was a lot of really good keyboarding. So does your synthesizer have actual keyboard that you can keyboard into the music?
Absolutely, yes, yes, and that's essentially the way I do it. Sometimes, well, I'm playing away, and then you might reach over to a slider, a fader, as it's called, or turn a knob back and forth, that kind of thing, to alter that sound. You get back with two hands and take off with that. And
It's just amazing. I bet you could launch another career as, one of these pianists that sit in airports and play intuitively for people, and people put money in a jar or something. I've seen that all over the world. Um, anyway, I highly recommend this album. You'll be able to reach it either going directly to Bandcamp or to thevoiceofmeaning.com, Herb Ernst Music. The Bandcamp will ask you if sign in, and if you want to donate any money towards the album, or donate 0 or donate 50 cents. It'll accept whatever you give them. And then you'll be able to actually download the entire 27 minutes. And anybody who loves this genre of new age music, I highly recommend doing it. Herb, you've produced 8 albums. I actually purchased all 8 of them on iTunes, so I can play them anytime I want and listen in my headphones, and I do often.
Mm.
Is there going to be a 9th?
Well, if the universe is willing, and I think it is, yes, I am working on a new album, and it's called Light Rider. And all I can say is it'll be ready when it's ready. It was
sort of in the intuitive mode.
Right.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah,
And I actually started it years ago, and I put it on the shelf saying, I know that spiritually I'm not there yet. I also know that technologically the instrumentation is not there yet either. I'm not finding the sounds that I want to express what I'm feeling. So I would just shelve it. And then a couple of years later, come back to it and work with it. And then, no, that's just not it. And all of that kind of thing. So it's been a work in progress for a long, long time. And I hope that when it's finally done, it will be worth all that effort. But the primary focus of Light Rider is self-empowerment. We are in a situation now in our culture, it seems to me, that we are in the middle of a lot of demands that are being made on us, and we can feel exhausted and wondering where to turn. What do we do with this? How are we going to deal with this? I mean, it could be climate change. It could be pandemics. It could be social unrest. It could be all kinds of changes that are going on, and a mixture of all that. And we get into a situation of completely being overwhelmed with what do we do? Well, this music, Light Rider, is intended to help a person become self-empowered. And what does that mean? That means tuning in to a higher energy where the energy comes in and inspires you and gives you motivation and helps you resolve issues and problems to cope with all the changes. And I think this album is really needed in our world, and I don't want to overblow it, so to speak, but that's what I've been working on.
The longer you wait, the more it's needed. So,
well, that's the other thing.
yeah,
That's true.
I'm going to add a call to action, and that is those of you who are listening, please comment. I'll share those comments with her. And if you think he ought to produce Light Rider, light a fire underneath him, put something in the comment. You can also listen to all of his music for free on his website. But I would really encourage you to buy some, either on Bandcamp or more on iTunes. Herb has not yet become a multi-millionaire like some of the early New Age groups and composers. But I feel there is great value and comfort into your music. And we can go on and on, but I think we're going to have other sessions kind of breaking down the different albums, what they do for you. This, intuitive music and beautiful music is one of the themes of our YouTube channel. And also please subscribe and like and comment. We are totally non-commercial, but we want to be seen. The problem is us 70-plus-year-olds are been put on the back shelf, I think, by society. And this is a way that we can be seen and heard and share ideas with the world. Ulrich,
and ring the upper right bell so that you get notices of when new videos get produced, especially the ones with Herb.
Correct. But I really, Herb, if you're willing to have another complete, at least half-hour session, kind of dissecting the spirit of the dream and some observations, philosophical observations that I've made as a result of listening to it for about 300 times and never getting tired of it. But that is, just stay tuned for more interviews. Do you want to add any parting comments, Herb?
Well, I just wanted to say that the thing with Spirit of the Dream is that I went in there with no preconceptions. It was just a blank slate. And I just had to trust my higher self or my inner self or the universe or whatever you want to call that, and just go in. And I think I was successful in that. And it's just describing feelings through the medium of music. And that is one of the huge differences, I think, between intuitive music and about everything else that has so much left brain structure put into it. I'd like to also say that if people want to visit my website, you can read about tonal symbols. You can read about the development of the Dreamflight trilogy. You can find out more about my album, about getting in touch with the inner self, inner child, and also balancing spirituality with sensuality, the physical. It's called Angels in Ecstasy. And then Diamond Soul, which is a follow-up to that. The diamond has facets on it, symbolizing the different aspects of your personality. And that symbolizes the soul. And the diamond, okay, to make it gleam, you have to buff it and clean the diamond and make it clear and more transparent to let the light shine through. And the light shining through is symbol of the higher consciousness. So each album has its idea and inspiration, and you can read all about that on my website. And I've got to tell you, it has a very, very clever name to this website. Are you ready? Get a piece of paper, get a pen or pencil, whatever, because here it comes. The name of my website is herbernst.com. So if you can do that, you're good to go.
Okay, with that note, we'll say goodbye until next time. Thank you for listening to The Voice of Meaning.